Now let's speak with the psychologist, Emma Kenny. Emma, are people just feeling... these restrictions, they're not sort of life-changing, are they? They might be a bit irritated by them. How would you sum up how the nation is feeling?
I think frustrated was a really good word to use. I also think quite angry, and I also think quite confused. And on top of that, I know that we're saying that it doesn't signify the biggest of restrictions and changes, but when you're starting to say that people can't get into a nightclub without a vaccine passport, that's a massive infringement on rights and a massive infringement of democracy. So to some degree, even if you just think about it in that capacity, that's going to change people's mindset towards the country they live in, because it's become segregated, whether we like to acknowledge that or otherwise. So on a mental health level, that's really scary for people.
Gloria's right, isn't she, Emma, that for individuals, these aren't particularly onerous restrictions, annoying, irritating are good words to use. I agree. On the other hand, if you're trying to run a business that's right on the edge, this could tip you into bankruptcy. You won't be building up the reserves of cash as many businesses do in the run-up to Christmas. That's going to affect the kind of psychological makeup of the nation, isn't it? Because in the end, businesses are run by people. They're run by families. They're run by ordinary men and women in many cases.
Absolutely. And lots of these industries have already been affected by not getting any support really financially apart from loans throughout the whole crisis. So they were already at the back door of being able to promote their own well-being within that experience financially. Add to that the fact that now, people have said things that have made people cancel all their Christmas parties. Add to that the fact that you're not going to coerce and force people who don't want a vaccine into a vaccine, so they won't go to nightclubs. It's as simple as that. Young people are actually really savvy. They're not stupid. They know when they're being forced into something, whether you call it by another name or otherwise. So psychologically, for the people who are trying to just create great environments for people to come and enjoy themselves, because dancing, for example, that is such a big part of our human condition. It's to do with our tribal experience. We go and we let loose. For well-being, it's amazing. So it's not just that it's taking away from the families who are creating these amazing opportunities for us to go and enjoy ourselves. It's taking away from the very human core spirit, which is to be free and enjoy that freedom and express that freedom through dance. And we've had that forever. And it's completely insane to me what we're doing to an already decimated area of hospitality. So I think the psychological well-being of the nation is at an all-time low. That's certainly booked by the research that's coming out. And even though these restrictions aren't as terrible yet as last year, it certainly says that life as we know it has changed. And I think that for anybody who's living in our world right now, particularly in the UK, who's been very used to just being able to go about their business without any concern, it does feel incredibly restrictive psychologically, not necessarily because of the restrictions now, but because of what it says about what might happen tomorrow or next week or next year. And unfortunately, that's a position where you feel anxious because you don't know what's going to happen next. And life is never secure. Of course it isn't. The psychological condition of security is a myth. But usually we're able to bank on the leaders of our country having the best interests at heart. And it hasn't felt like that for a long time yet.
Some people really like working from home. For others, it can cause depression and anxiety. What particular groups of people are susceptible to isolation that comes from working from home?
I think that's a really good question, because I think that we've stopped talking about one of the biggest killers, which is social isolation. Until the pandemic, we talked about that constantly. The NHS were massively around the fact that social isolation will literally reduce the years that you have on this planet. And now we don't like to talk about that because that doesn't fit the narrative. Secondly, the best thing to come out of the pandemic, without a doubt, in essence, is the fact that now people can work at home, which is great for women who used to have a glass ceiling a lot of the time because of the nurture for the children. So there are some great bits there. But when it comes down to the kind of people who suffer when they're socially isolated, obviously we know the elderly awfully suffer, but also young people, because any form of social isolation is bad for you, because you need people around you, you need community support, you need to be able to reach out, you need those kind of cooler, water cooler conversations that you have at work where you just take 5 minutes to decompress. And what we also know about people working at home is that very often they're trying to multitask, dealing with the kids and so on and so forth. So they get a lot of stress, and also they work longer because they can answer the emails at 1 o'clock in the morning. So there are these good points and bad elements there. And I wouldn't say that working from home is terrible if you like it. And I think it's fantastic that people have got the option to do that. I think that should be something that we should carry on forever, because it makes a big difference to people's well-being. But for those who don't like it, then they should be able to go into work. When you think about the advice and guidance, it's nonsensical, because you can say that people can go into work or can work from home. And therefore, really, is that going to have an impact on the virus? It just doesn't really play out. But if we're going to say for people's well-being, is working at home a great thing? Yes, it is if you love it, as long as you get breaks. And equally, it's being around your colleagues like you are right now. Is that a good thing? Brilliant, because mental wellness is very much formed from our minute interactions with people we have on a regular basis. And also, the more interactions that we have with people we like and the more time we spend around people we love, the longer our lifespan. So it's actually good for giving us a longer life and benefits health, full stop.
Emma, opinion polls show there's some evidence that the public's becoming a little bit more sceptical of anti-COVID restrictions, certainly a little less tolerant. As a psychologist, is that shift in public mood something that you recognise? Do you think it's there? And do the recent political scandals surrounding parties in Downing Street, if they do undermine public trust, won't they add to that shift in public mood?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the trust in the government has just been shot recently. I mean, I think it's happened time and time and time again. And with respect, I don't even blame the government for wanting to hang out with each other and have parties, because that's just part of human instinct. But what it said to us is when we were dealing with scenarios where I had to deal with people whose parents were dying and they couldn't see them last year, and where people fundamentally were separated and segregated from the families that they love, causing them deep psychological distress, to know that that didn't play out in the government who's meant to be leading us is obviously going to cause a deep sense of frustration and also retaliation and retribution to some degree. I think what we've got to do now is recognise that it's completely natural after nearly 2 years to feel very frustrated, deeply unhappy about the situations that are unfolding, and very sceptical because things don't make sense. And what annoys me about the way that we're treated as a general public, and this happens constantly, is it feels like they underestimate the average intelligence of human beings. We're incredibly discerning. We're very analytical. When something smells off, it's because it's off. And while some people are highly traumatized, and that means they will do whatever they're told because understandably they've had their sense of safety absolutely broken down. They might have lost people during this period of time, so it feels very present and real for them. You have those individuals who are having a horrific time and still feel terrified. Equally, you have people hugely desensitized now. They don't care what they hear because it feels like it didn't play out in reality for them. So on both levels of the spectrum, we have an issue there. So what the best could happen now is that they start saying, you are human beings with autonomous choice, make the right decisions for yourself and carry on with your lives, instead of being terrified about something that may happen, because it is going to happen. Every single one of us is going to have to come to terms with our mortality. The sooner we do that, the better we will be able to live fully in the present moment, as opposed to being directed by a group of people who can't even follow their own advice and guidance.
Emma Kenny, psychologist, thanks a lot for joining us on GB News.